Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Untitled Reviews, this being a show where I talk about dramas that I watch. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the latest episode of Ordinary Joe. A lot of really interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. So, obviously, the one constant is obviously because these different variations of Joe's life are all on the same timeline. This is an interesting perspective on seeing like how these different Joes handle the whole, 9/11, the 20th anniversary of 9/11. Obviously, one of the people lost during that was his dad. And especially when the whole conversation is about like one choice, how it can change your life. And obviously we're focusing on that one decision at college, but he has to live with the regret of one decision he made when he was younger, like, because each one of those Joes doesn't, like, has their reservation about going to, like, the memorial. They don't, like, it didn't come up too much about Joe when, being a cop in that world, well, now a detective, but it definitely comes up in musician Joe's life as well as Nurse Joe's life. And it's interesting because Nurse Joe is the only one whose life put him in a position where he was ready to like actually deal with that. Because it took a combination of Jenny, his mom, but specifically Chris being the difference amongst those other two lives. Not having Chris there, like Chris being there, especially a child bearing the name of your dad. Like you honor your dad by like naming your child after him. That's what kind of pushed him to do it, because initially he tried to make excuses like, right, that's your mom's day, so she should take you. But then like Jenny's like, right, like why, it's still kind of a lie. So like, why did you lie to him? And then his mom, he tried to get her to take, but it's like, right, you've never gone, but now, now that Chris actually wants to go, maybe you should. But we find out the reasoning is because years ago, his dad basically got tickets to a game and he wanted to go, but Joe decided he wanted to do a battle with the band, so he'd rather go. And the moment that decision was made, I was like, that's why you have regrets. Because he's like, if I had gone to that game, then my dad would still be alive. Because in, it doesn't come up in the other realities, but in the reality where Joe is a cop, his uncle says, like, right, like, do you know how much guilt I feel over the fact is that when my brother died, I was at a game. And it's like, because Joe hasn't opened up about that, his uncle doesn't know, like, he's carrying a lot of guilt about that. The only person who will open up to, and Nurse Joe opened up to his mom about, like, that, in which she's like, it's been 20 years, like, you shouldn't have to, like, carry that guilt over something like that. But he feels responsible. It's like, if I had gone to the game with Dad, maybe he'd be alive. But he went into work that day because he gave the tickets away to Frank. So it's like how their lives would be so much different, like, But once again, that's not that choice. That same choice was made across all these three different lives. Like, the only choice that was different was that path at college, So, once again, no matter what path you have, like, because that's the interesting thing of, like, yeah, that's the what if of it. Like, yeah, like, he made this choice, but all those past choices still resonate across all of those lives. And it's just a question of how he's dealing with them. Because I think it's hard to say, like, I'm not trying to say, like, because that Joe out of any of them struggles the most with, like, being open with his emotions. That's kind of, like, Jenny's kind of issue at the time. It's like, right, like, you're not really good at, like, talking about, like, your feelings and stuff like that, like, opening up. It's like, you want to make things change, like, just kind of, like, actually change by, like, starting to open up more and kind of, like, and he ultimately does. And I don't know. I don't know if that was for better or for worse. Once again, like, every life comes with its struggles and how you react to it. Like I said, he's the only one that actually went to it. Musician Joe just watched, which even Amy's like, why'd you do it this year? So it's like, we can just be in the background and anonymous. He's like, why do we have to have this conversation year and year and time again? But in cop reality, his mom's the one that does it. It's like, right, she has the strength to go there and he kind of doesn't, which isn't like, I'm not trying to say like, oh, he's weak or something. It's like, no, like, the conversation is everyone grieves in their own way type of situation. So it's like, who are you to tell someone how they should grieve? And so it's just an interesting parallel in that regard of like, it's just interesting that, like I said, I think there was like Chris and everything ended up being a major contributing factor in why in the nurse reality, Nurse Joe went, but none of the other Joes did. So. But even that reality has its own complications because Jenny was able to kind of get like, some kind of grant or whatever that would allow her to like basically not just be an associate, that she'd be able to like actually like go back to school, finish, and actually come like be able to kind of fully like get the job she rightfully deserves as kind of a lawyer. But the stipulation is it would mean going to a school in Atlanta. And that's complicated because it's like, right, you've been putting your life, your dream all on hold for so long. Like, don't put it off any longer. But where her and Joe stands, and that would mean being away from her son for like a year. And it's like, but like I said, also like her and Joe, it's like where they currently stand, like it would mean like Joe would have to move with them too. He'd have to leave behind because like, you know, this is where he was born and raised. Obviously his mom's here. So like, you know, where they currently stand, like, I don't know if she personally would feel right, especially because where the circumstances currently are, it's like, right, like each one of them gets Chris, like, you know, they on different days type of situation. So like, how would that work with her moving to Atlanta? So that's a complicated stipulation on that regard. It's interesting too with Bobby's situation too, because like obviously like Joe knows Bobby through like obviously like he was one of the nurses there operating on him after he got shot in this reality. Once again, we have it in that reality, we don't even touch on the investigation and stuff like that. But like Bobby's worried like, oh, I might not be able to walk anymore because his feet, like he can't really feel them. So he's like, right, like the bullet didn't hit my spine, but it's like, what was it, like the momentum of it or something like that was what Joe was saying. Like, we don't know in the long run, like it could have like caused some kind of nerve damage, and it can take a year for like nerves to potentially like, recover. So it's like, right, we got to be patient. So, which we know based on the musician reality, he has Parkinson's. So maybe that played, like all of that played a contributing factor, like. But also in that reality, he wasn't, maybe that's going to be what that ends up being, that he's able to like find out about it sooner. Because in the nurse Joe situation, he's in the hospital already, so that might give him earlier signs to, well, no, because it's happening, he's finding out under different circumstances. And the fact is, in the police Joe reality, he never went to the hospital, so like finding out, like, you know, so once again, and it also I think speaks different volumes because whatever happened to piss the guy off that tried to kill Bobby in both the nurse reality as well as the cop reality didn't happen in the musician reality because he never went to the hospital for that. So there was something along that 10-year path that is different. We just don't, because basically in the cop reality, he gets Jenny's help looking into it. So it turns out like, but what she was able to discover is that the guy who shot Bobby, or at least tried to kill him, because he says like, oh, it's personal, he destroyed my family, and he knows what he did. And so it turns out he actually was a campaign contributor. So it's like going from campaign contributor to assassin, like what happened there. So whatever it was, it happened in those two realities, but it potentially didn't happen in the musician one. So it's like, what makes that musician reality a little different? Commonality between those realities, between cop reality and that reality, is that Amy is working with him. And so I think there's, well, no, because like the difference is like Amy is working with him in that reality, but things are different. But in the cop reality, Amy's working with him, but he's still. But I think it's going to be. I'm a little all over the place. I should talk about these realities one at a time rather than like being like bouncing back and forth between them, because I'm sure that's just going to get confusing. I've tried to distinguish them by like bringing up the respective Joe that's in that reality. But the thing is, we know that Bobby and Amy are together in the cop reality, which that's a whole complication in its own right, because it's like, right, so she's kind of having an affair situation. We don't know if like they're married, but at least they're together in some fashion. So maybe them being together in that reality like led to whatever that is, but them not being together in this reality made it so, but it's like they're all, but also because the thing about the nurse reality too is she's with Eric in that reality, so like she's also not working for him, but it still happened. So it's like, that's the fascinating thing. So like, what's the contributing, like what's the factor in that changed between the three realities that led to like such a like similar outcome yet different outcome across two realities, but completely different in one, you know? So that's fascinating. Obviously, the Jenny circumstances are complicated, both in the cop reality as well, obviously, like the nurse reality as well, but also the musician reality, because Joe gets his Uncle Frank, which I was under the impression like his Uncle Frank wasn't too happy about the whole like, Joe being a musician, but it seems like no, I was that was just me reading too much into it. I think like his uncle is more like his manager in that regard, but he gets his uncle's help to look for his son in the musician reality. But the thing is, Jenny would basically have to sign off of it for them to kind of like get some of the adoption records. But there is a complication of like, right, like what do you think is going to happen? Like this kid has a life. Like you're basically going to turn like it is this thing of like Joe has a right to know about a son that he didn't know existed, and he wants that son to be a part of his life, especially with everything going on with Amy, because she makes it clear like, right, she doesn't want children because like their circumstances, just like the pregnancy's never working out. The thing is that Joe doesn't know like he carries a recessive gene. Now, whether that's contributing to like, whether it's the recessive gene inside of him and maybe there's some gene inside of Amy that never pans out. I don't know if that recessive gene is enough of an issue why he can't have children in this, like why like him and Amy can't have children together type of thing. But regardless, she's like been through that pain too much, which you can understand, like, right, she doesn't want to go down that route again and again of just kind of reliving that pain. Very much like how Joe never wanted to go to the memorials just because he didn't want to, it's a reminder of just, for one, it's just like all that death and sacrifice, but also like, the bravery of so many people. But when it comes to like, right, you lost someone personally, and once again he had his own guilt associated with that if like you don't want to relive like the pain of like, right, it's just a reminder that my dad's going over and over again. But it's the same thing I think with this Amy situation. So Joe's kind of, because he didn't even tell Amy about, because he had the opportunity, he's like, oh yeah, I talked to Jenny, it's about this and that, but like he never went into the whole thing. I thought initially, and this could still be a contributing factor, it's like considering everything they're going through right now, obviously the argument about having a family, like because I think for him, it's like, I don't want to bring up the fact is, right, I have a child out there, considering, like, we can't have kids of our own, and for me to find out, like, oh, like, I have a child, like, that complicate our relationship a little bit, because it's like, because it make it more glaring of, like, right, like, oh, you have a child with someone else, but you can't have a child with me. But also the thing is, musician Joe doesn't know about Chris's condition in that reality. So that might complicate things, because it's like, yeah, you want to get in this kid's life, and it's both. Yeah, you have every right to, because like you want to get to know your son, but also there is a bit of selfishness in it, and I think it's not wrong necessarily to be wanting to be selfish in that regard, but it's still the thing of you're going to turn someone's life upside down and complicate it just because you want a son and everything, especially because Amy's like, right, like, is that enough? And he's like, I guess it has to be, because he doesn't, like, for him it's like, right, I don't really have much of a choice in the matter, do I, like, so, but despite all the consequences, like, I don't care, I have to pull the trigger on this, like, Uncle Frank, I need to see my son, and it's like, yourself a decision, there will always be not consequences, but you never know the ripple effect of that. But like I said, he doesn't know about Chris's condition in that reality, so, because he knows Lucas's condition in that in the cop reality, but he doesn't know that Lucas is his son. Because even in the reality where he's a musician, like, Jenny has her reservations about it, because like she doesn't want to open up a wound. She's like, her husband doesn't know about it. Because it's also complicated too, because she gave that child up for adoption, but lo and behold, she has a new family now. I'm sure that causes some issues. But even Joe's like, if you didn't want me to kind of interfere or anything, like, why'd you tell me that? And she's like, because I guess like by talking to you, I was able to offset some of like my own guilt and regrets about the whole thing. And he's like, well, congratulations, you did that, and now like I know I have a son, and I want to, so it's like it's a complicated situation to be in, and I, because it is like I said, I think that is a contributing factor on Jenny's part, because it's like the guilt of like, right, I gave my child up for adoption, but in this I have twins of my own, so I think that's which is also, it's got to be a little awkward when Jenny was like, oh yeah, like her husband and the children wanted to take a photo with Joe. That had to be a little awkward in that regard, but But in the cop reality, Jenny is working with Joe, but her husband doesn't want him to know about Lucas, because it's like, right, like, because he's afraid, like, if Joe finds out, it's going to complicate their lives, because it's like, but Jenny's like, yes, I almost wanted to tell him, because for one, he has a right to know he has a child, but also to know that he has that recessive gene that can lead to that. Like, for her, it's like, it's also about letting him know, like, if he ever wants to have children in the future, what to be prepared for, because she's like, I wish I had known. She's like, I would not do anything differently, but at least I could have prepared. So it's like, she's like, I had no intentions of really, like, telling Joe, I don't want to complicate our life. I like what it is, but it is still a thing of, like, he does have a right to know. And also, like, you know, because that's also another, like I said, like, he at least probably knows in the nursing reality, because, like, obviously him and Jenny, like, having Chris together, but also, like, he doesn't know that in the musician reality nor the cop reality. So the fascinating complications that kind of arise. It is interesting, though, that, like, everyone pushed Joe in the cop reality of, like, they're sitting around the table. It's like, what about you and Amy? And his mom's like, what? It's like, come on, like, don't pass up this opportunity. You met someone once and there was kind of a connection, and then for you to find that person, like, so much later on, like, they all kind of pushed for it. And even, you know, he hung out with her, because it turns out in that reality, she actually cut through some red tape for him and was able to get his dad's badge number brought back so that he could get it, you know, like, so that was pretty dope. Like, that's why she didn't answer his call initially when he called, because she's like, right, next time I'm gonna pick it up. I just didn't want to, like, ruin the surprise. So, you know, things are good, but it's like, right, everyone's pushing you to be in this relationship with someone who's already in a relationship. Like, it's not like anyone could have known, but that's going to be a complication in its own, especially because I mean, it was already kind of a complicated thing, because it's like, right, you're meeting someone who is connected to your case, because she works for the guy that's at the heart of your case, because he was the potential victim in all of this. But obviously it's like, right, trying to find out, like, why that guy has a grudge against Bobby, what he's trying to do. Like, I guess Bobby's potentially up to some shady stuff, and maybe that applies across, maybe, like, in the nursing reality and the cop reality, he did this shady thing, but maybe in the musician reality he didn't. Or maybe he got caught by someone in both of those realities and that guy killed him, but maybe that guy never did in the musician reality. Who knows? Because maybe that's also why Bobby's trying to push for her to take over. I mean, his condition, sure, but maybe there's other contributing factors. I don't know. There's just a lot of moving pieces in all of this that I think it's just, you know, once again, it's just like the concept of this show is so interesting. I also didn't realize it till, like, I saw his name, but I wasn't sure, and I looked into it. I was like, yeah, Matt Reeves is connected to this. I was like, holy crap, I didn't know that. That's so fascinating. I think it said he created this, I think. So I was like, oh, that's fascinating, man. You got your, like, hands in so many, like, I mean, I think that applies to, like, a lot of people, like, you know, have their hands in a lot of pies, like, when it comes to, like, the entertainment industry, of just, like, you know, someone could be, like, multiple producers on multiple things and multiple projects all at once, running at once. You know, it's just fascinating. It's actually interesting because speaking of the cop reality, Amy did say, like, oh yeah, she kind of, because she's like, oh, like, I have these backstage tickets to this thing, and he's like, oh, I like that. She's like, I know. She's like, I've held on to, like, that meeting we had, like, because I guess things aren't really good with Bobby, and it's just nice to know, like kind of like, she's kind of stuck in her own what if of, like, right, like, what if me and him had actually clicked, and what their life would be. Obviously we get a picture of that, obviously we do, but she doesn't. So maybe that's why she's doing this whole thing with him, because maybe it's a situation of she knows some of the shady stuff that he's up to, and she's having reservations about that, and she wants to pull out of not just what they're up to, but also I don't know, maybe that's that angle of it. Maybe it's just me putting too much stock in that, but maybe it's just purely like, no, it's just like she's kind of unhappy in her relationship, and you know, she kind of, like, wants to latch on to something where, like, maybe she never felt that connection with Bobby like she did in that instant with Joe at graduation. So, I don't know. I'm curious to find out more about that and just how complicated that's going to be, especially because it's like Joe's going to be around, and it's like, oh, like, he's the one that saved Bobby's life, and now he's technically dating your significant other. Like I said, I don't know whether that's his wife or, like, girlfriend, but it's like, right, dating his significant other. That's going to be a very murky and complicated angle, especially considering he's also the one investigating things too, even though even his Uncle Frank was like, you shouldn't even be looking in the case because it's kind of like you're already connected to it, so it kind of it's not what's the word I'm looking for, it's almost a little bit of a conflict of interest to a certain extent, like you investigating a case that you're kind of directly like that he shouldn't like be involved in stuff like that. That's why his like Frank is the one that talked to the shooter and not Joe, and why he just had Joe listen in. But I'm very interested to ultimately see where all of this ends up taking us going forward into the next episode. But really, that's all I want to talk about. Till the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and goodbye.